Okay, today I am back with Dave Sims. Dave, we were talking the other day, and I couldn't enjoy it anymore, and wanted to keep going. Both of us, I think, it was a great time. And so, thank you so much for coming back and working with us again here and spending another bit of time with us. I really appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome.
So we were talking last time about your Olympic experience. This time I'm going to ask you a few other questions, if you don't mind. I'm looking behind you, and I'm seeing it seems like you got every certificate you can get back there, but I'm sure there's even more. What do you have up there? It looks like there's some world-class certificates, things like that. Can you show us? Or at least tell us about them?
Okay, so yeah, like the top row, these here.
The blue ones there? Yep.
Those are world ranking certificates. Back in the 1980s, before we had the internet, the only way you would learn about your world rankings was you'd wait until after the end of the year, and they would be published. Usually in Swimming World magazine was where people in the United States got to see their world rankings. And then, you know, a couple months later, these certificates would show up.
And those, if I'm right, those mean that you produced one of the top 25 times in the world that year as an individual. Is that right? Making you one of the top 25 swimmers in the world. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And you have more of those than I do. But they're really special, right? They're things that at the time you don't think so, but then all of a sudden they mean a lot later.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it really is sort of, you know, when your goal is to be number one in the world, you know, it's not really, it doesn't seem like a big deal to be ranked 8th in the world or whatever. Right. But you know, 10, 20 years later,
you realize that you really accomplished something.
Yeah, like how many people and how many swimmers there are in the world. And you know, that's pretty phenomenal. And you know, when I mention it to people who don't know me very well, or if they're just learning about my swimming background and they learn that, you know, I was world ranked, it's amazing how impressed they are. And that's just not even for people who are ranked top 25 in the world. Like my kids went to the Olympic trials, and, you know, people are like floored when they hear that, you know. So the average person thinks that is such an accomplishment, and it is.
It's a huge accomplishment for most people, that's right, but you've gone way farther. That's right.
Yeah, so I like a lot of swimmers, you know, I just would get these certificates in the mail and leave them in the envelope and throw them in a drawer or whatever. And luckily for me, my mom saved a lot of these.
Right, moms, and my coach saved mine. I crunched mine up and threw it in the garbage. Like, what are you doing? Now I have it on my wall like you do.
And so luckily, you know, like years later, when I finally had a home and a home office, and I had a place to, you know, put things on the wall, I had these. So the second row there, these are
the ones with the flag on them, right?
American flag. Those are NCAA All-American certificates. So every year, at the end of the year, and they still do this today. They send out these certificates to anybody who's an All-American.
And what does All-American mean? That's top 25 in the United States?
No, for NCAA, it used to be you had to be in the finals at the NCAA championships.
I have one of those too, or a couple of them, I think. But again, not like yours.
Yeah,
some amazing.
They don't have a place on them or anything, but you know, if you made the finals or the consolation finals,
that's how you get them. Okay.
You would get a certificate.
Got it.
And then I have some photos and some other certificates. And just
the USA Swimming one there, it looks like as well, right? I'm sure. Yep.
That's right. So yeah, when this one right here, when you set. And this one over here, when you set an American record or like a national age group record, it would give you a record certificate like that. So I held a couple national age group records, but it was only after I was like, you know, 18 years old.
Right.
Um, and then I have a couple photos. There's two photos of national teams that I was on. One was the Olympic team, and we're standing on the front steps at the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
the other photo of national team is the team that the following year went to the Soviet Union, and we competed in a dual meet there. So that
So
was
that's a
pretty
very special wall.
yeah.
Those are some very special things that most people in the world would not have something like that.
You
That's
know, I think
wonderful.
everybody has their own
They have their own things. That's right.
accomplishments that mean just as much, if not more, to
You
them.
know, I noticed that too. I think at every level, your accomplishments mean a huge amount to you, right? That's important to everybody. I
Yeah,
agree. Yep.
yeah. Over there, next to the lamp, is one of the medals that we were given when we made the Olympic team in 1980.
Wow.
And that's a Congressional Gold Medal. And there's
That's
an
amazing.
interesting story behind that. The Congressional Gold Medal is something that the United States Congress gives out to certain recipients every so often. They have to usually be nominated by the president or by Congress. The first recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal was George Washington, and there are several other presidents that have achieved this. Famous inventors such as Thomas Edison, Benjamin Franklin, and a whole host of other famous Americans. Okay. So what happened when the United States decided to boycott? Congress scrambled to somehow recognize the Olympians. And so what happened was, they got together and somebody sponsored a bill to award these medals, these Congressional Gold Medals, to all the Olympians. Previously, they had only been given out one at a time to an individual. And that was the first time that they decided to give out 450 of these to all 450 members of the Olympic team.
Wow.
And they wanted to have these done and ready in time for the event where the Olympians all traveled to Washington, D.C. and met at the White House and at the Capitol, and had got to meet the president and other members of Congress. And so they gave us this medal, but they never really explained what it was. And
Right.
we thought it was just like some souvenir that we were receiving.
Right.
If you think about what it was like back in the days without the internet, there were probably a few Americans that understood what the Congressional Gold Medal was, because they were only given out like one a year, and sometimes none at all. Right. I think ours was like the 150th medal given out. Anyway, none of us really knew what it was or what it meant. And so everybody left there and went on with their lives. And then in 2007, I think it was, there was something in the news about a gentleman who was receiving the Congressional Gold Medal that year. And it was written by the New York Times. And the article said, the Congressional Gold Medal has been given out to such notable recipients as, and it listed, the top 5 famous individuals in the U.S. And then it said, and the 1980 U.S. Olympic team.
And you realize you have one.
Yeah, and my friend Ron Nugent, who was also qualified in the 1500 meter freestyle with me, he sent me an email. He said, Dave, did you know that that's what this was? And I was like, no. And so we corresponded back and forth and tried to figure out what it was. And now to fast forward 2007, we have the internet, we can do our research. And so sure enough, it was a Congressional Gold Medal. But when we looked on the listing, the official listing, which is kept by the clerk of the House of the Representatives, it wasn't on the official list. And so Ron and I started calling people in Washington, D.C. saying, like, well, why isn't this on the official list?
Right.
And, like the poor lady who answered the phone in Washington at the clerk of the House, she was like, well, I'll look into it. And she called the U.S. Mint, and she's called us back and says it's not a Congressional Gold Medal because it's not made of gold. And we're like, what do you mean it's not made of gold? And she said, yes, it's gold plated. All the other ones are gold. And she must have thought that we were calling to find out, like, if our metal was worth a lot of money.
Right, if you could melt it down or something.
And then we were like, but it's not on the list. And she said, it's not on the list because it's not gold. And we were like, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
So we went and looked in the, if you go to your library, a big public library, you can find the congressional record for every year in our United States history. And so we went to the congressional record, Ron and I. Ron did more work than I did, but we went and we looked at the record, and it says that, the senator who sponsored this said, this is a Congressional Gold Medal. We should give these to the members of the Olympic team. Let's vote on this. And so they voted on it, and it was always meant to be a Congressional Gold Medal. And even though it wasn't made of gold, it was gold plated. Right. And it was gold plated, by the way, because they had to make 450 of these. Right. And it was May of 1980, and at that point
they didn't want to open up Fort Knox for that.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a lot of gold. They would have had. It wasn't in anyone's budget for that year, Right. So that would have been a lot of money. I don't know.
Would you be willing to show us that one more time so everybody can see that medal? That's incredible.
So this is it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, right. So that's the emblem of the U.S. Olympic team back then. Wow. And then on the back, wow. I don't know if you can see that, but on the back it actually says right here, by act of Congress.
Wow. So it was a special one just printed for that.
Yeah, they're all unique. Every time. Yeah, so every Congressional Gold Medal is different. They're all made by the U.S. Mint, and they're all unique.
Such an honor. Amazing.
So, like Ron and I were floored when we found out about this. And we started telling some of our Olympian friends, and they were like, no, I had no idea. And so we got in touch with the U.S. Olympic Committee and told them, and we needed to enlist their help to get the congressional record changed. Or not the record, but the list, the official list at the clerk of the House. Right. So the USOC got involved, and we also, Ron's local senator from, or representative from Kansas also got involved, and ultimately we got the official listing changed. So, that was important. And
your name's right up there with George Washington on that one. That's great.
Yeah. And, what was interesting about getting this recognition from the clerk of the House and this realization that it was a Congressional Gold Medal that we were given, it finally made more sense to some of the members of the Olympic team. In other words, they finally felt like the country did recognize.
You recognize what kind of pain you went through.
What kind of sacrifice we were forced to make.
And that was a tremendous sacrifice, and you were forced to make that. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a sense, it wasn't really a sacrifice. We were sacrificed.
Yep.
So anyway, some people on the team actually it was very cathartic for them. There were a couple members of the team who had either lost or sold or given away their medal because they didn't understand its significance. And, unfortunately, those people can't get it replaced because, when the U.S. Mint, after the U.S. Mint makes it, they don't keep the mold.
Right.
So that was unfortunate. There were some people that on the team that have passed away since,
Right.
since
And never knew.
And they never knew. Fortunately, their families know. And so that was kind of a interesting chapter to the whole boycott story.
There's so much to it, and the Olympics, going to the Olympics and achieving that, there's just so much to that to start with. But to your story, there's so much more to it in the way that like you said, the sacrifice. One of the things that we do in our Mind Works program, and one of the things that we work with swimmers' minds, and actually not just swimmers, but other folks as well. But one of the things that we focus on is say, when you're focusing on something, you want to focus on things that you can control. And when you focus on things that you can't control, that are out of your control, you get a lot of anxiety that builds up, because you're trying to fix something, right? And there's nothing else you guys could have done. I mean, you made the Olympics, you did everything to make them, and you made them, and then everything else was totally out of your control, and that causes so much anxiety to people. And they live with it sometimes. It's, in this case, for a lifetime. So it's not something you'll forget.
It's a very timely topic right now, given that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and just
and
about
people are going through something else that's kind of been forced in another way. That's right.
Yeah, right. Everybody's living with this uncertainty in their lives, and focusing on the things you can't control really leads to a lot of anxiety.
And one of the things, a question I wanted to ask you here is, a lot of times when you hear the words, Eagle Scout, and people think, wow, that's a really big achievement people have made, and they've, and so there's a lot of respect that goes in, and there's a certain aura of what you expect, an expectation of that type of person. When you see, just from your standpoint, when you see somebody who's an Olympian, and you hear of somebody that's an Olympian, what do you see in that case? Because you've been around, and you are an Olympian, right? And you've been around Olympians. What are they like? That's a common denominator, if you can, because I know they're all different.
Yeah, there's a lot of difference, and a lot of different commonalities. So there's, I think you should separate that question into two. Like,
please do. Go ahead.
What's the commonality or common traits that's inside of somebody that allows them to get to be an Olympian? And then, kind of what is that person like afterward and for the rest of their lives? And the first part of that question is where so many people are so similar. Nearly every Olympian has the same story. They all got inspired as a kid, as a youngster, by something, someone, somewhere, and then, dedicated their life to it and was willing to sacrifice everything else. Everything else was either something that helped you get there or was an obstacle to getting there. But
so there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice to get there.
Yeah, right. I actually, told my kids when they were younger swimmers, and they get to like a point in high school, or young age group, kind of at 13, 14 age, where at a certain point, you go from just, sort of dabbling in a sport and having fun with it towards actually working hard and working towards goals. And I told them, I was like, this isn't for everybody. It
I
involves
say the same thing. It is not for everybody.
it involves increasing levels of pain and sacrifice.
Mhm.
And it's, you know, it's not just one level, it's like increasing the whole way up.
Right.
Um, and so that's really hard. And most sane people would never sign up for that.
I always say there's something a little different about the great people in anything, and that's why they're great. You know, they're willing to take those, whatever it is, those steps to that go beyond.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that there's a lot of commonality in Olympians, and you know what it takes to get there. I don't know if you've seen Michael Phelps's recent documentary.
The weight of gold.
Yeah, uh, you know, there's he lays it out that, you know, kind of they all go through the same thing,
Mhm.
and then he sort of goes a little further and presents, you know, kind of the dark side of it even.
Right.
And
Right, because there's definitely some challenges in there too.
yeah, and so that what he is bringing up in that documentary is true, and it always has been true, at least in my lifetime. And that is when you do dedicate yourself so single-mindedly towards an athletic pursuit, or really any pursuit, um, you you internalize it, and it's who you are, and you identify with that um, deeply, you know, to your core. And you know, in my case, I was Dave the swimmer, and you know, it's true for kids who, you know, dedicate their young lives to swimming through high school even. There comes a point in time where their swimming career is over and they need to move on or want to move on to something else, but they still have this self-identification as the swimmer.
Right, you're still Dave the swimmer inside in many ways. Yes.
Yeah, and when the swimming ends, then everybody goes through a phase where they're kind of feel kind of lost, like, who am I if I'm not Dave the swimmer? Who am I?
Right.
And you know, that's an interesting phase of life. You find out a lot about yourself in that phase of life,
You sure do.
and you know, that's
It's
can
a
be a
big
great thing.
transition. It's a
Yeah,
big transition. And you
it's a
go
huge
from
transition.
where you're top of the world and people are asking for your autographs and things like this. And then the next thing you know, you might be in a job and you're working for somebody and they're berating you for something you didn't do well. And you're thinking, I don't know if I would have given you my autograph a little while ago. And
Yeah,
now I remember that.
yeah.
So let me ask you another question. So, you know, to look at the journey that you've taken here, once you go through that whole journey, you look back, really just taking a quick snapshot on it, would you say, um, which one would you say would be more important, passion or performance to achievement?
Uh, I It depends on what level you're talking about. Um, if you're talking about making the finals at the Olympics or the U.S. Olympic trials, it's both.
Hmm.
You can't get there
Can't
without having
separate
both.
them.
Yeah, I've you know, in all of my years of swimming, I've seen people that had way more talent than me, with more talent than I'd had, and they didn't get as far. And I've seen, and it's because they didn't have the passion. And I've seen people who were extremely passionate, more passionate than I was, and they didn't have the talent and the performance, so they didn't get as far. So it's a balance between the two. You have to have both. You know, if you're just competing because you love the sport, you love swimming, you love being in the water, then passion is way more important.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah. And so, you know, like at the high school level, there's thousands and thousands of high school swimmers, right? Um, and you want to be with the ones who are really passionate.
Hmm.
If you had to pick a team, if you wanted to be on a team with people who are just totally passionate about what they're doing, or just really high performers, um, you might choose high performers at first, but then you realize this isn't a lot of fun. You want to be with the
You want
team
the
over there
excitement
that
and the energy.
you like cheering their heads off and having a lot of fun and high fiving and cares about each other, and the relays are more important than the individual swims, and the team score is more important.
Right.
Um, and people who paint their faces and uh, shave their heads and do all this crazy stuff because they're so passionate about it. That to me, sounds like a lot more fun.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I always enjoyed the fun stuff. That's right. So I got a couple more questions for you. Um, just for you, what do you say? What do you think the most important role a swim coach plays with a swimmer like you?
Uh, Most important role.
Yeah,
It's a role. It's one as a partner. Your coach is your partner, and I learned that and realized that when I was in high school.
I love
And
that, Dave. That's incredible. That's great insight.
um,
Please go ahead. That's great.
yeah, so my coach was Tim Hill, and he was a super dedicated coach, um, like so many young coaches are. But he was sort of ahead of his time in terms of the mental training aspect of it, and he really had tremendous insights as to what it took to be, to reach the highest level, to be an elite swimmer. And so I remember, you know, thinking as I was training in high school, and this was probably in 1980 when, I was training for this elusive goal of making the Olympic team, and we were never really certain along the way that there was going to be an Olympics, or the U.S. was going to participate in the Olympics. And so I had a lot to think about, especially when a lot of days I had my own lane and I was doing, sets that nobody else was doing at the YMCA.
Right. It's lonely at the top there.
Well, yeah, like if nobody else really wanted to do it, and or they just weren't further enough along in their development that they could maintain the same intervals. So it was then when I was, like he would stand over me with a stopwatch and he'd get my splits and be there, working as hard as I was working and making all the plans and, you know, creating the pathway for me to do what I did. And, I could very much see that in so many other elite swimmers. Um, it's a little harder to see where you have a coach that is has a whole team full of great swimmers, because the teams that are full of great swimmers, the swimmers feed off of each other, and the coach's job is really just to get them into the pool and let them give them the
Have
set,
at each other in some way, right?
kind of let them loose and just let them fight it out with each other. And it's totally different when you come from a program where, you're kind of the only swimmer, or maybe there's only 2 or 3 of you that are elite swimmers and swimming at the highest level. So the coach really becomes your partner, and their success is dependent on your success, and your success is totally dependent on their capabilities.
Wow.
Um, and so you really begin to think of them as a partner.
Okay. I've got, I think one more really important question that I have for you. I could ask you questions all day, but I know you're limited on time. But what effect do you feel your swimming has had later in your professional life? How do you see it playing a part in what you do now?
Oh, I'm just willing to work harder than most people. I would say that has well, there's two attributes I would say that stick with you for life. One, your willingness to work hard in order to accomplish something, and understanding that um, nothing really great ever happens unless it involves a lot of hard work. Um, and I've the whole process of setting goals and breaking them down, and you know taking small steps to get there. I've applied that to many, many other aspects of my life. So that's helpful. And, you'd be, I mean, not you, but most people are shocked to understand like how that works. And there's a lot of people that are actually afraid of that whole process. But
There's a
it,
lot of people. I'm so surprised, and I haven't heard that said that way, but I think you're absolutely right. There
yeah,
are people that are afraid to follow that process.
and I suppose this is from swimming, but I just have I understand that maintaining a positive mental attitude
Hmm.
is super important for almost everything in life.
Hmm.
Um, and, it's, I know what self talk is. I don't know if a lot of people really know what self talk is. And, when you hear those negative thoughts, you have to recognize it first for what it is. And then only once you recognize what it is, you can recognize what's causing it, where it's coming from, and then you have the opportunity to turn it around
Right.
and change
Fear and
that.
doubt, right? A lot of it's fear and doubt that we all experience, but how you deal with them and how you react to them and what you think and your thoughts make a huge difference.
Yeah, right.
That's
And so, I would say those, three things are what most every swimmer learns if they swim long enough and if they have good coaches. Um, and those are, things that you just take with you and apply to all other aspects of your life. And, I've heard so many people say that um, if they're an employer,
mhm.
they just love to hire swimmers because, for those three reasons, really. And, it's a great package to bring to any organization, whether it's a professional organization or a volunteer organization. Um, you know, just about any place you go in life, others want to have that personality type around.
Hmm.
So
Right.
because it's good for everybody.
It's uplifting, it's supportive, right? And we were taught that and trained that way. My a while ago, I had a friend of mine telling me, and she said, um, it's funny. She says, when I get tired, I take a break, I rest. And I said, yeah. And she says, but you're crazy. She says, when you get tired, you work harder. And I said, yeah, that's the way we're taught our whole lives, right? When you're in practice and you're tired, they say go faster, go harder, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you do. And she says, but you just don't stop, and that's it. The idea is, and you become overwhelming to whatever's in your way, right? And any obstacles. I have a last question, if you don't mind. I know the last question, but you were looking at some of our tools online the other day. And you mentioned that you'd seen some of them, and you seemed like you were interested in some. Which tools did you like, and what did you see that you liked up there?
Um, I was pretty intrigued by the race mapping.
The race map. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
What did you
This,
like about that? It's a really different breakdown, right?
yeah, it really is, and I'm not sure I totally understand it yet, but I get what it's about, and I really think that could be a really useful tool for a lot of you know, beginner swimmers and intermediate swimmers.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
a,
It's kind of like a surgical breakdown of a race, right?
yeah, right. And realizing that, you know, you success in a swimming race comes from doing about 1,000 things right.
Right.
And, you know, like it's a lot to think about when you're in a race. So you really got to think about it when you're in your workout and your training and your practice.
Right. So it all sets it up so that you know how long it takes you to get off the block, how
Yeah,
long it takes you from the block to get the handbrake, right? And then
yeah,
how fast you have to cycle, right? And that's so important because then you know how fast you got to do your sit-ups, right? Because you want to train your muscles to contract at that rate, or how fast you got to do your push-ups, right? And then you train your body to contract at that rate. And
yeah,
then you know what we did with that is really interesting. So we have that tool, and we're the only ones in the world that have that. We created that, and then what you get from that is you're also able to then, if you have a video, like they have all these different video programs, like there's Huddle Technique, and I think there's like a Coach's Eye or something like this, and you can videotape the swimmer and you can put a watch on them. You can tell how fast they're cycling.
yeah,
And then they have this little thing called a tempo trainer. I think that's
yeah,
by Finis, and they put it in their cap. So let's say you've got a cycle at 1.22, you know, to get your race to happen the way you want it to. You set it to 1.22, and you get the map that tells you what to do. Then you've got the video telling you what you're doing, and then you take it in the water and you train at that rate. You can do the same thing with your push-ups and sit-ups, and you know, train at that rate with that tempo trainer. I think it's so we call it race map triangulation, and so you're triangulating those three together,
yeah,
and it's amazing. What we found is it just clears up for everybody what needs to be done in their turn and their stroke. It just makes it easy. And thank
sure.
you for your time, Dave. It's been incredible getting to know you a little bit. It's just really nice.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I
Same here.
enjoyed getting to know you too. I wish I had known you earlier in my swimming career.